Hey, perfect. Thank you very much for joining. Welcome everyone to the session on the blue economy and financing SDG 14, Life Below Water. My name is Dennis Flitsch and I lead Unify Sustainable Blue Economy Finance Initiative. Just before we start, please do send us your questions via the chat early on and we will try and answer some of these at the end of the session. So why the topic of ocean finance? For an answer to this question, one just has to read the global headlines of the last month. An oil spill off Mauritius, fishing fleets circling the marine protected area around the Galapagos Islands, and an ammonium nitrate explosion at the Beirut port are just three examples of the potentially damaging effects of mismanaged marine industries. Add to that a flood of COVID-related plastic waste, and it is clear that the ocean is in deep trouble. It seems we're actively destroying the world's largest carbon sink, largest haven for biodiversity, and the basis of food security and coastal protection for billions of people. But not all is just doom and gloom. Banks, insurers, and investors who are providing capital and insurance to power marine industries are slowly waking up to the fact that their financial activities can have a sizable impact on ocean health. By building sustainable blue finance practices into their decision-making processes, and by engaging with their clients on these issues, financial institutions have a unique opportunity to steer ocean industries towards sustainability and help on the climate agenda too. And we're not only talking about preserving one of the most biodiverse ecosystems on the planet. The sustainable blue economy also provides a business opportunity. If managed sustainably, the blue economy is expected to double in size to around $3 trillion by 2030. Building resilience and long-term stability into the equation allows financial players to reduce risks of default and claims, as well as profiting from innovative solution-oriented businesses. Unify is working closely with banks, insurers, and investors to build industry guidance and tools, helping with this transition towards a sustainable blue economy. And I'm happy to welcome some of the organizations we work with, sharing their stories today. I'd like to welcome Werner Schmidt, Director at the European Investment Bank, Armel de Vienne, Vice President in ESG Research and Engagement Analyst at Rockefeller Capital Management, Rowan Douglas, Head of Capital Science and Policy Practice at Willis Towers Watson, and Karen Sack, President and CEO at Ocean Unite and co-chair of the Ocean Risk and Resilience Action Alliance. And before we start, I just wanted to mention that Rowan is having some technical issues, so either we can resolve them towards the end of this panel, or he will be able to submit a video message for everyone to watch after the session. I want to start with Werner today and ask, why do you think financial institutions like the EIB are bringing oceans onto the agenda, and why now? Over to you, Werner. Werner, can you hear me?
I have problems too.
We can hear you fine. You're off again now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, all good. Go ahead. No.
Okay. Doesn't work. Sorry.
Dennis, I can't hear you. No. I can't hear you anymore.
Doesn't.
Dana, can you hear me?
I cannot.
I can't hear anybody besides you, Vanna. Can you hear me? Hmm.
Can you hear me,
I can hear you.
everyone? I'm really very sorry. Good, it works. And sorry for that technical issue. Everything was working well. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining this important session. Why the oceans and why now for the EIB? Well, in fact, as Dennis had already outlined, the international community is waking up towards the threat of the oceans and also the important need for a sustainable future to include the oceans. They are not only a very important resource, but also they are very much under pressure at the moment. The latest IPCC reports and also the examples Dennis just outlined are clearly there. Financial institutions and the wider investment community have a key role in stimulating and working towards the move towards a sustainable future, also included on the ocean side. And obviously the EIB as the EU Climate Bank, we have made very important commitments in this respect, actually. We will be financing up to 50% of our financing will go into environmental, sustainable and climate action related activities. We have last year stopped our financing towards fossil fuel, non-abated fossil fuel. And also as of next year, we will have our projects Paris aligned. Concretely, in the ocean sphere, we are working on the Clean and Sustainable Ocean Program, which has several legs. In fact, this what we call the so-called Blue SOS, this is Blue Sustainable Ocean Strategy, where we want to lend some 2.5 billion over the next years to trigger investments up to 5 billion euros. Second, we are working with our partner institutions, Agence Française de Développement and KfW, on the Clean Ocean Initiative, the COI, where we want to lend some additional 2 billion for plastics removal in the oceans. And last but not least, an important aspect is also the blue economy financing principles, where we work with others to establish these as a guiding framework for ocean finance. So taking care of the oceans is actually not only now, but in particular when the COVID-related aspects are important. We do not have to build back better. We have to direct investments in the green, but in particular in the blue economy. And last but not least, as Dennis has outlined, the ocean economy also has enormous potential and enormous opportunities, but only if it's done in a sustainable manner. Thank you.
Thanks, Werner, very much. Following on to that, I actually wanted to ask, what are the barriers for this, the barriers for entry on the blue economy for financial institutions, and how at the EIB are you creating enabling conditions?
Thank you, Dennis. Well, there was a recent survey earlier this year, actually, which has confirmed the main barriers as the lack of investment grade projects, of good projects, but also the lack of expertise and the specific knowledge of some of the promoters. So what we are trying to do is to strengthen these enabling conditions. The projects are often very complex. Markets are unknown or unproven. So in this context, actually, we also have seen that the main funding gaps are often at the very early stages of the project cycle. Now, concretely, what we are doing, let me outline three main aspects. On the one hand, for us, for the EIB, as the role of an financial institution, we consider ourselves as a crowding in bank. So basically, we are working together with private and public finance to work together and finance the promising operations. The second point here is also advisory. Both financial but also technical advice is key to help to make better projects. One concrete example is, for instance, a fund which we've been working with our sister institution, the European Investment Fund, earlier this year, which in cooperation with the European Commission has launched the Blue Invest Fund, a 75 million euro finance instrument to provide equity funds to target specifically SMEs in the blue economy. Second point for the EIB is tapping the financial markets, the international investors. We were the first and remain the largest issuer of green bonds, which we've started basically 2007. And this was an important stimulus for institutional investors in the green sphere. We have now lately also embarked on sustainability awareness funds, so-called SABs, first on the water side, but now also expanding it to health and education. And last but not least, I think a point which I've alluded to earlier is transparency and awareness. And in this context, actually, this definitely needs to be increased. And the sustainable blue economy financing principles, where we are working together with UNEP FI, but also with our co-founders, the European Commission, WWF, WRI, and many others, we see that this initiative to develop as the kind of gold standard for ocean finance in the years to come. And in this respect, actually, I would invite as many private and public financial institutions to join these standards and to sign them. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Werner. I definitely echo that call to action. And swiftly moving on to our next speaker. At Rockefeller, you've just taken the step to actually launching an ocean engagement fund last month, which was very exciting. Could you tell us a bit more about the business case for investing in the sustainable blue economy?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Dennis. And, actually, I think this echoes a little bit what Werner was talking about too, but maybe just to start off, SDG 14, or Life Below Water, is one of the most underinvested SDGs. And I think we all know if it were considered its own economy, it would be the 7th largest in the world. Not to mention, and this is the study that Werner was also mentioning, so that the study found that 9 out of 10 institutional investors are interested in financing the sustainable ocean economy. So, and anecdotally, I can say that we've been seeing that interest rising as well. So, the question has really been how. And as soon as you have an investment grade product available, there is interest. The need is there, the interest is there. And so you just need to find the opportunity. And so, to your point, we did recently launch a new fund, but let me actually start off by saying we actually have 2 thematic public equity strategies that are geared towards the blue economy. Across the board, our thematic investing team at Rockefeller Asset Management, we seek 2 things. We seek out performance and positive change. But these 2 strategies do it slightly differently. So our initial strategy was actually the climate solution strategy, which consists of companies that have designed a product or service that's geared towards solving one of the many climate challenges, from water efficiency technology to help reduce water usage, environmental consultancies that are preparing cities for rising sea levels, aquaculture producers, you name it, all issues that are clearly aligned with the blue economy. The second strategy that you mentioned, we're excited to announce that we just launched at the beginning of the month together with Credit Suisse, is the Ocean Engagement Strategy. And this strategy is focused on SDG 14, looking to generate alpha and positive outcomes for ocean health through engagement, though. So essentially what we're doing is we're looking to identify companies that currently have some sort of a negative impact on our marine environments through their operations, and are engaging with them to improve their practices, which we believe will also give them a competitive advantage and gain market share.
That's great to hear, Ahmed. It's really good to hear some practical examples, actually, and some people doing this work on the ground. So, what I was interested in is what was in this whole process of bringing the sustainable blue economy onto your business side. What was the biggest hurdle for you in this process, and how did you overcome that?
Yeah, I think that there are a couple of challenges. I think firstly, and again, just to echo a little bit what Werner was saying, there's a lack of understanding of what the blue economy is and the interlinkages of climate change. So, our climate solution strategy was actually initially called our ocean strategy when it launched 8-9 years ago, because it focused and still does on a number of topics that are pertinent to a sustainable blue economy. But people didn't really understand what that was. It was a little too conceptual. So there's a lot of education that still needs to be done on the subject, and which I think is happening now, looking at just even this conference. I think there was also the stigma or misconception that impact and thematic funds mean concessionary returns. And that's just simply not the case. Our climate solutions strategy has an 8-year track record about performance. And I must say, if my head of compliance were here, he'd say, past performance is not indicative of future returns, so please keep that in mind. But you're seeing a change in the larger market environment of changing regulations, consumer awareness, demand for efficiency, all things that are favorably aligned with the blue economy. But I think, and I'll end on this, another challenge that we faced, especially in launching the ocean engagement strategy with Credit Suisse, is that no one's ever done this before. There is no ocean impact framework or index or taxonomies. So we need to create our own proprietary framework, which is what we did together with the Ocean Foundation, which are our nonprofit partners who we've worked with for over 10 years. But we needed to come up with a framework to assess business activities that are impacting the ocean environment. And I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, looking at the panelists around me, I'm sure everyone sort of knows a thing or two about what it is being first, but that is inherently a challenge in itself.
Yes, I think definitely, and that challenge of being the first, and this being such a new topic for a lot of the financial actors out there, that's something that we obviously work with all of you together at Unify on building standards and guidance, but more on that later. We were meant to hear from Rowan Douglas at this point, but it seems that the technical issues couldn't be resolved. So without further ado, I would move on to our third speaker, Karen Sack, who is generally moving and working a lot around the topic of ocean risk. And it would be great to hear from you, Karen, specifically because there's a lot of doom and gloom around this ocean topic in general. And I wanted to ask you what makes you hopeful that financial institutions can help turn this situation around, and how are you at Aura especially working towards this? And I hope that the unmuting and muting issue is now possible to resolve. So far you're mute. Now we can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me?
Yes, all good. Please go ahead.
Okay, great. It says that I'm still on mute. Thank you so much, Dennis. It's a pleasure to be here. As we were talking about this, the charge really was kind of what gives me hope, or us hope, that financial institutions can help. And I was speaking with my son yesterday, and his somewhat cynical but very clear response was, well, nobody else has, so they have to. And I think we have to agree, but we also have to add that it's in the interest of the finance sector as asset managers, investors, and owners to do so as well. It's also socially and environmentally responsible. And while governments, at least some governments around the world, flounder, we're seeing the private sector step up to a great opportunity to work for a better world, to reinvest in the future. And it's critical and urgent that they do so with transparency and accountability. It's a sound business strategy. And here are just a few facts as to why. And I think this also speaks to a question that we've had in the chat as well. By 2050, an estimated 800 million people will be at risk from surge from extreme weather events. And 570 low-lying coastal cities will face sea level rise of at least 0.5 meter. Coastal communities in developing countries and small islands are likely to be the most severely impacted, with women and girls especially hard hit. The costs of ocean-related hazards are also mounting, and it's estimated that by 2050, the global community is going to face annual costs of over $1 trillion to coastal urban areas from combined effects of rising sea level and extreme weather events. So the scale and the urgency of these challenges call really for a transformative global response. And that's why investing in nature-based solutions is so key to all of that. Here are some more really, I think, kind of eye-opening figures about investments into biodiversity, or the lack of them. So a report released last month by the Paulson Institute said that by 2030, the total biodiversity financing gap will be between $600 and $800 billion per annum. But in the past decade, just $90 billion was spent on biodiversity protection. In contrast, during the same period, $500 billion was spent on fossil fuel and agricultural subsidies, which makes it absolutely clear that we have to reprioritize our investments if we're going to put ourselves on track to a world of, 1.5 degrees of warming max and regenerate biodiversity. And since we're talking about coastal natural capital or the ocean, the Paulson report asserts that the restoration of mangroves, seagrasses, and salt marshes to historical baseline levels by 2050 will cost $27 to $37 billion annually, which is around the same amount that is spent on perverse fisheries subsidies every year. And McKinsey has recently found that communities with intact mangroves are exposed to significantly less damage from extreme weather events than those with degraded or converted mangroves. And they estimated that this function alone can generate $82 billion of annual value globally. Unfortunately, I think as Werner said, at the moment for the private sector, there are many perceived barriers to investing in nature-based solutions for coastal protection. These include a lack of understanding of how investing in natural capital can provide a timely and productive return, a really limited pipeline of products, and insufficient data and modeling capabilities for investors to quantify ocean-derived risks. So there's a huge opportunity to develop and pioneer finance and insurance products that reduce those risks and bring a return on investment. And that's where our alliance comes in. So the Ocean Risk and Resilience Action Alliance is a multi-sector collaboration between governments, financial institutions, the insurance industry, environmental organizations, multilateral organizations, and stakeholders from the global south. And our purpose is to build resilience in the regions and communities most vulnerable to ocean risk by pioneering the finance and insurance products that can incentivize investment into nature-based solutions, with a goal of driving $500 million of investment into coastal nature by 2030 and surfacing at least 15 novel finance products by 2025. And to build the foundation of this new marketplace, we're launching today, in fact, right now, an open and competitive Ocean Resilience Innovation Challenge. The focus really is to identify those innovative and scalable finance and insurance products that increase coastal resilience and reduce ocean risk while delivering a return on investment. Our aim is to select at least 10 innovations, judging entries on criteria including viability, innovativeness, scale of impact, and equity. And we're excited to be partnering with UNEP and the Inter-American Development Bank's Natural Capital Innovation Lab on this. These innovations are going to be selected in addition to some of the projects that the Alliance is already supporting and scaling around the world with support from the Government of Canada, which include projects like investing in new pilots for blue carbon resilience credits in the Caribbean, expanding the development of insurance products for coral reefs, developing financial literacy training for small-scale fishers in the Philippines, and building a coastal risk index. And with our partners at the Stockholm Resilience Center, developing some of the research and knowledge products that can help underpin fiscal and government policy on some of these issues. So by bringing unexpected allies together, we believe we can find and drive forward the solutions that invest in nature, resilience, and people around the globe. So we hope that folks here will go to oceanriskalliance.org to learn more about the work and the Innovation Challenge and to join us in this incredible effort. Thanks, Dennis.
Thanks, Karen. That's very exciting, and thanks also for launching this challenge. So I encourage all viewers, please do check out this initiative. I would like to take the remaining time that we have to maybe address some of the questions that have been coming through on the chat, but also some other questions that might be of interest for listeners out there. And I would like to start with Werner. And sorry for putting you on the spot there, but obviously COVID-19 is a very, it's on everyone's mind, and everyone is trying to find out how can we ensure a post-COVID, whenever that will be, recovery that is green. And I would like to ask you, on your opinion, how can we ensure that this post-COVID recovery is also blue?
You can hear me, I think. Yes.
Yes, all good.
Good, excellent. Well, I'm happy about that. Let me just add 2 points before I answer your specific question on the blue COVID, which came from the audience actually. On the one hand, there was this trade-off between limitless growth and finite resources. Obviously, this is something which is a very valid question, and obviously for each and every bank, it's a valid question. And I heard about the risk aspects Karen was just mentioning. Now, the EIB is a public bank. We are the EU bank, and as such, we are a non-for-profit organization. But what we obviously will do in our finance is that actually all the social, environmental aspects are clearly fully considered and in line with the best standards and also with the legislation, obviously. Now, we are also not looking necessarily only at financial profitability, but on the contrary, we're looking at the economic profitability and what does this project contribute to this. Now, second, on the law of the sea jurisdiction, that's obviously something which is important. We are a policy taker. We are not a policy maker, but obviously I know that my colleagues from the European Commission are very much involved in this because obviously the law of the sea is a very important. Third point I would like to underline, and I can only share the view of Karen regarding the risk and the climate risk considerations. This has now also is finding entry into our credit risk considerations internally because obviously they are absolutely super relevant. Now, how do we make sure that the COVID-19 return will be greener, blue? There is obviously an important role of our guidance in our sectors to make sure that these investments are geared towards what we consider green. And obviously, we as financial institutions, I outlined a number of our programs are specifically focusing on providing help, support to the blue economy sectors in that. Thank you. And I hope Dennis is.
We may have lost Dennis, so we'll just continue to have this conversation, and maybe Amelie, you can speak to some of those issues. Yeah.
Yeah, and also I think I'm seeing a bunch of the questions coming into the chat, so I may just take the opportunity to address one of them. So, question was, how do we go about creating the framework or taxonomy for our ocean engagement, and what do we use to inform it, and how dynamic it is? So, maybe to take a step back, we basically started with a blank canvas, like I mentioned, and we worked together with the Ocean Foundation, which has deep expertise in this area as well, to try to identify what are the problems that our ocean is currently facing, whether it's overfishing, whether it's pollution, whether it's ocean acidification, just listed out what all the issues were, and then tried to bucket them into classifications. So we actually have 3 main classifications called carbon transition, pollution prevention, and ocean conservation, with 9 sub-themes underneath. And then it was a matter of figuring out what types of companies are companies that are providing a solution to these sub-themes. What are the companies that have an impact but are improving? And what are the types of companies or business models that are really just endangering the environment and have very little room to shift their business model and change? We will not be able to invest in those types of companies that are just simply endangering the environment and have no room for improvement. What we are trying to do is look for companies maybe currently have a negative impact, but get them to reduce that negative impact. Because at the end of the day, they're going to stick around. Most likely, a number of these companies are not going to go out of business entirely. But what we want to help them do and push them to do is to reduce and mitigate that negative impact even if it's a little bit, that every little bit counts at this point. And maybe just to give an example, what we would do, and I can't speak to specific holdings, but there is a private company that did something similar to what we're looking to do with our companies, Cora. It's a French hypermarket. And they recently started selling algae-fed salmon in their stores, which actually increased sales by 12%. But from the ocean health aspect, algae-fed salmon is actually a lot better for the environment because typically salmon are also fed marine content. So essentially people are fishing more fish to feed to salmon for us to eat. And that obviously puts an added stress on overfishing practices. So by being able to switch the input feed away from marine content to algae, you're starting to lessen the impact of the salmon that's essentially consumed. And by putting pressure on these retailers to start demanding that in their procurement, you're starting to see a shift happen. And it's also, beneficial to the company, the supermarket itself, on a top line basis, as well as to ocean health. So these are the types of solutions we're trying to find. I think we'd all like to save the world all at once, but it's not always manageable. And so you need to find issues where you can really drive positive change.
So I think, Amelie, you've flagged one thing, but I think there are different ways of investing in these different areas, and Jesse has raised these issues about the great ambitions, but what about the fundamental conflict between finite resources and unbounded investments? And I think this is where, there is no one silver bullet. But we do know is that investment into nature is absolutely critical. And I don't think I mentioned the partnership that our alliance has with the IUCN and the Blue Natural Capital Financing Facility. They've been doing some really incredible work as well, as both with the Blue Finance Principles, also in establishing criteria for investment into products that invest into nature. And I think that this is where, there's a combination here of some of the private sector investments that are impact investments going into corporates that are trying to be more sustainable. And then there's the investment into growing resilience. Hopefully these two things are complementary, but also recognizing that regenerating biodiversity is key to food security. Building resilience is key to national security, to averting things like mass migration and displacement as a result of climate change. And so we have to see these investments happen. And it has to be, it's not just the private sector. We're talking a lot about the private sector, obviously, in this topic, but there has to be that combination between the public and the private sector. And unfortunately, we are in a situation where there are many countries that are just not stepping up. So Dennis, before he vaporized, but thankfully has just come back, was asking a question about COVID and post-COVID recovery. And in that, I think we really have to think about some of the steps that, in particular, the EU is taking to build back in a more consolidated and better way, and build back bluer when it comes to the ocean. There's been an ocean mission that the EU has set up, which has got identified key areas for development, one of which speaks to one of the questions, which goes to ocean governance, which is absolutely critical across the board and has to complement any efforts that are taken. So we're in a space where we need the private sector to move things forward. We need innovation, and we need governments to step up. And hopefully all of those elements together can push this agenda forward. We can't do it independently on each front. It's got to be a concerted movement. We just don't have time.
Thanks very much, Karen, for this comment. And again, sorry for the technical issues, and thanks for staying with us through these. I think I would like to close this panel with one last question, a bit more of a practical question for each of you. It would be great, I think, for anyone any financial institutions out there who want to get involved in this topic, who think, okay, the blue economy is interesting. It would be great, I think, to hear from each and every single one of you to if you have any advice for them of how they can take that topic on board, what are the first steps they should take, and I think crucially also, how do you engage internal stakeholders on this topic? I think that would be maybe very useful practical advice before we close. Maybe Werner, you start, then Amel, and then Karen.
Yes, with pleasure. Well, indeed, actually, it's not only the external stakeholders, it's also the internal stakeholders which we need to be. We have set up a specific coordination group for ocean-related aspects in order to increase also the level, together with our colleagues from the operations, the ones who are facing the clients, in order to increase the awareness, and also through a specific programs have increased that. A practical advice for anyone who wants to join is obviously, well, contact UNEP FI, contact the EIB, but also look at the Blue Economy financing principles as the overall framework for financial institutions to really bring the ocean agenda together forward.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, educate yourself first, because there's so many different topics to get involved in. I think we've spoken about a number of them. There's a ton of opportunity, and it depends a little bit on where your interests lie and how you want to get involved. But I think everybody here mentioned different ways in which you can look at this issue and how to target it. So, I would echo Vanna there as well. But in terms of convincing internal stakeholders, yes, I mean, I think I came from a bit more of an untraditional background in finance. I studied marine science and for my bachelor's, so I understood the need to start addressing and financing the blue economy. But traditional finance, I think, was maybe slightly more jaded. And so that's been an uphill. It was initially, I think, an uphill battle, but I think these days you're seeing people be much more receptive to it, because they're seeing again the need and the solutions. Solutions are really also succeeding these days, and so the issue is being much more accepted than it ever has been before. So
thank you, Ahmed. Karen, any closing words on this?
Thanks, Dennis. I think there are so many challenges that have been met in the past on different issues that fall outside of the areas that we work in. And that's part of the reason behind bringing multiple stakeholders together in the Ocean Risk and Resilience Action Alliance, so that we can sit at the table and, instead of speaking different languages, we can begin to understand one another, understand the challenges that the folks working on the ground in the ocean space or with communities are facing, and the challenges that the finance sector is facing, and move forward. We're seeing incredible leadership from financial and insurance companies like AXA, for example, that are stepping forward on the climate issue and the biodiversity issue. So if anyone wants to learn anything, that's a great company to learn from. And come and sit at the table, come and join in, come and learn. We've all got a lot to learn. We've got a lot of solutions to develop together. And this is where, again, our innovation challenge is to invite people to the table so that we can see what we can co-develop and then deploy quickly to get things done. So we, again, got the oceanriskalliance.org website that people can go to, find out some information, and reach out to us. We're happy to put folks into contact with the many partners that we work with to help answer their questions.
Thank you, Karen, and thanks everyone for these very actionable recommendations. Thanks everyone for listening in and listening to our saddle panel for the discussion. If you want to check out our panelists' work and our work at UNEP FI, please do check out the download section of this session for more information, and visit our website as well, unepfi.org. I do encourage you and any interested parties, financial institutions, to do join the UNEP FI Sustainable Finance initiative in more general, and our work on the blue economy. So thanks very much, and hope to continue this conversation around the blue economy with many of you soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Dennis.
All right.
All right. Yep. Bye, everybody.
Dennis, bye-bye. Dennis, I think, has
Yeah,
left us already. All right. It was a
Thanks,
pleasure,
Lena.
ladies, and
Bye-bye.
all the very best. Have a good day.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.